Have you ever stopped to think that throughout history there were men and women who defied logic, leaving behind traces of mystery, magic, and power? Some were remembered as heroes, others as villains, and some are still surrounded by theories and legends that refuse to die. Today we're diving into the lives of the most famous alchemists, sorcerers, and mystics the world has ever known. But buckle up, because some of these names carry dark secrets that even history itself couldn't fully explain. Merlin, the Wizard of Destiny. Out of all legendary wizards, none is as iconic as Merlin. More than just King Arthur's advisor, Merlin was seen as a being who existed between two worlds, the human and the supernatural. Legends say he was born from a demonic union, inheriting prophetic gifts that allowed him to foresee wars, kingdoms, and even the end of times. His presence in Camelot wasn't just that of a wise man. He represented the balance between the order of the throne and the forces of chaos. Some even claim Merlin didn't just give advice, he manipulated destiny itself. And here's a wild detail. In certain medieval versions, he actually lived time backwards from the future to the past, which supposedly explained his ability to predict everything. Mystery or metaphor, Merlin remains the ultimate archetype of the supreme wizard, inspiring stories all the way from Harry Potter to the Lord of the Rings. But if Merlin represents wisdom and power, the next figure is the exact opposite, a woman feared, seductive, and deadly. Morgana Le Fay, the treacherous enchantress. Morgana, Arthur's half-sister, started out as an ally but quickly became one of his greatest enemies. Known as Morgana Le Fay, she wasn't just any sorceress. Her powers ranged from dream manipulation to full-on shape-shifting, which lured many knights of the Round Table into her traps. In some legends, Morgana was driven by a thirst for power, in others, by family resentment. But all stories agree on one thing. Her magic was intense, dangerous, and dangerously alluring. Interestingly, scholars point out that Morgana's image may have been inspired by ancient pagan goddesses tied to death and rebirth. That makes her not just a traitor, but also a symbol of the suppressed feminine power of the Middle Ages. And here's the kicker. Many accounts suggest that after Arthur's death, it was Morgana who took him to Avalon, the mystical island, promising that one day he'd return. Enemy or guardian? That paradox is exactly what keeps her name alive to this day. And if you think these legendary sorcerers are impressive, wait until you meet the next one, a figure who transcended books and went on to inspire an entire generation of modern fantasy heroes. Gandalf, the Keeper of Hope. Even though he's fictional, Gandalf carries centuries of mythology and ancient wisdom. Created by J.R.R. Tolkien, he was inspired by Norse figures like Odin, the wandering god with a hat and staff. In The Lord of the Rings, Gandalf isn't just a spell-casting wizard. He's the voice of conscience and hope. He always shows up when all seems lost, pushing heroes beyond their limits. His greatest strength isn't his magic. It's his ability to unite people against the darkness. A fascinating detail is that Tolkien, who was deeply religious, gave Gandalf traits of a hidden messiah, someone sent to guide humanity without forcing his power upon them. Because of this, many scholars see him as a reflection of the Christian archetype of a spiritual guide. But if Gandalf represents hope, the next figure shows us the darker side. A woman who could turn men into animals and toy with the fate of anyone daring to cross her path. Circe, the sorceress who defied the gods. In Greek mythology, Circe was a sorceress of hypnotic beauty who lived on the island of Aeaea. Anyone who set foot there rarely left unscathed. The most famous example comes from the Odyssey. When Odysseus' men invaded her island, she turned them into pigs with a single spell. But Circe wasn't all cruelty. In some myths, she fell in love with Odysseus and even helped him on his journey. This duality between love and destruction is what makes her so fascinating. Modern scholars suggest Circe may have been a metaphor for the Greek fear of female power. Her magic was tied to nature and animals, forces the Greeks both respected and feared. Here's a cool fact. In ancient Rome, Circe's herbs and potions were linked to the real use of hallucinogenic and medicinal plants, suggesting her legends might have sprung from the practices of real witches and healers. If Circe used her magic to transform men, The next figure tried to transform something even bigger: Christian faith itself. Simon Magus, the sorcerer who tried to buy God's power. Few names in early Christianity are as controversial as Simon Magus, also known as Simon the Sorcerer. In the Acts of the Apostles, he appears as a magician from Samaria who, after converting, tried to buy the power of the Holy Spirit from the apostles. That act gave rise to a word we still use today, simony, meaning the buying or selling of spiritual roles or blessings. But the legends about him go way beyond the Bible. Later writings claim Simon publicly challenged the apostles, boasting of divine powers. There is even a story that he attempted to fly before a crowd in Rome to prove his godhood, but fell to his death instead. For many scholars, Simon Magus embodies the danger of spiritual pride, someone seeking power not to change lives, but to glorify himself. If Simon became a warning about corruption in faith, the next name stands on the opposite side. A prophet who founded one of the world's oldest religions and forever shaped how humanity understands good and evil. Zarathustra, the prophet of fire. Long before Christianity or Islam, a man named Zarathustra, or Zoroaster, appeared in ancient Persia about 3,000 years ago. He founded Zoroastrianism, a religion that went on to influence giants like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Zarathustra wasn't a wizard in the traditional sense, but his spiritual vision transformed entire cultures. He taught about the dualism of good and evil, symbolized by the god of light, Ahura Mazda, and his rival Angra Mainyu, lord of darkness. This cosmic battle would later inspire the Christian idea of heaven and hell. Here's a fascinating detail. Zoroastrian rituals were centered on sacred fire, seen as the very embodiment of divine purity. Many fire temples still exist today in Iran and India, where descendants of the faith, the Parsis, continue practicing traditions that go back thousands of years. Even the German philosopher Nietzsche honored Zarathustra in his famous work, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, portraying him as a symbol of human wisdom and the eternal search for life's meaning. But while Zarathustra preached spiritual balance, the next figures show how magic was also tied to nature and the pursuit of secret knowledge of the elements. Aqui está a continuação da tradução, mantendo o mesmo estilo narrativo fluido, natural e no inglês americano. Druids, the guardians of nature. Long before Christianity spread across Europe, the Celtic people already followed their own spiritual masters, the Druids. They weren't just priests, they were also philosophers, healers, and even judges. They were seen as keepers of sacred knowledge that connected mankind with nature. Druidic rituals were shrouded in mystery, but we do know they involved sacred forests, ancient stones, and the use of mistletoe, a plant believed to hold magical powers. Their deep connection with the cycles of nature made them intermediaries between the human and the divine. Interestingly, Druids left no written records because they believed true wisdom could only be passed down orally, from master to apprentice. That only added to the aura of mystery around them. Today, many people associate the Druids with monuments like Stonehenge, though historians still debate whether they were directly connected to those constructions. But if the Druids sought harmony with nature, the next figure represents the opposite. Someone who gave himself over to the supernatural in exchange for absolute power, even if it cost him his soul. Faust, the man who made a pact with the devil. Few literary figures are as haunting as Faust. Immortalized by Goethe, his story tells of a scholar frustrated by the limits of human knowledge. In search of greater power, he strikes a deal with the devil, Mephistopheles, trading his soul for unlimited wisdom and earthly pleasures. The myth of Faust is powerful because it speaks to a universal temptation. How far would you go to get everything you ever wanted? His story has influenced Western culture for centuries, shaping theater, opera, classical music, and even modern film. And here it is the twist. Many believe Goethe was inspired by real stories of alchemists and magicians who experimented with forbidden formulas. Over time, Faust became the ultimate symbol of unchecked ambition and the heavy price of giving in to the darker side of desire. But while Faust sold his soul, the next figure was believed to embody divine wisdom and magic itself in ancient Egypt. Thoth, the god of writing and magic. At the heart of ancient Egypt stood a deity who combined knowledge, writing, and mystical power, Thoth. Often depicted with the head of an ibis or a baboon, he was revered as the guardian of wisdom and the scribe of the gods. Thoth was credited with inventing hieroglyphics and maintaining cosmic order through the written word. For the Egyptians, writing wasn't just about recording events. It was about creating reality. Each symbol carried magical power, and Thoth was the master of that secret. His temples became centers of study where priests practiced astronomy, mathematics, and alchemy. Many historians believe the Hermetic tradition, which later influenced medieval alchemists, originated from Thoth, also known as Hermes Trismegistus. But if Thoth embodied divine balance and knowledge, centuries later, a man would emerge who called himself the Great Beast, becoming one of the most controversial names in modern occultism, Aleister Crowley, the rebel magician. In the early 20th century, one name became synonymous with scandal and magic, Aleister Crowley. Dubbed the wickedest man in the world by the British press, he founded the philosophy of life known as Thelema, built around the phrase, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." Crowley was a poet, alchemist, occultist, and spiritual explorer. He wrote extensively about ritual magic, experimented with drugs to alter consciousness, and openly defied the religious norms of his time. To his followers, he was a visionary championing individual freedom. To his critics, he was a dangerous fraud. What's fascinating is that his influence went far beyond the occult. He inspired musicians like the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, and even David Bowie, and he remains a constant reference in pop culture. Decades after his death, groups still follow his teachings. But while Crowley pushed magic to the edge of scandal, the next figure blended science and alchemy, laying the foundation for modern medicine and proving that magic and science weren't always separate. Paracelsus, the alchemist who healed through nature. In the 16th century, when Europe was still steeped in superstition, emerged a man bold enough to challenge traditional medicine, Paracelsus. He believed healing didn't come only through prayers or bloodletting, as was common at the time, but through studying nature and its chemical elements. Called an alchemist, physician, and even a sorcerer, Paracelsus merged science and spirituality. He was among the first to use minerals and chemicals to treat diseases, anticipating what we now call modern pharmacology. But he didn't stop there. Paracelsus taught that the human body reflected the cosmos, and that true healing meant restoring balance between man and the universe. His revolutionary ideas made him a visionary, but also a target of criticism, as many accused him of practicing forbidden magic. And while Paracelsus looked to nature for answers, the next figure believed the secrets of the universe could be found through direct contact with angels. John Dee, the Queen's magician. Few names are as intriguing as John Dee, the personal advisor to Queen Elizabeth I of England. A brilliant mathematician, astronomer, and explorer, he was also deeply immersed in alchemy and the occult. John Dee believed he could communicate with angels using a system he called Enochian, a heavenly language that, according to him, revealed divine secrets. To accomplish this, he worked with Edward Kelly, a medium who claimed he could see angels in crystals and magical mirrors. Beyond his mystical pursuits, Dee was obsessed with the idea of the universal monarch, a ruler guided by divine knowledge who would bring peace to the world. His fascination with the occult made him a controversial figure, but also one admired for combining science, politics, and spirituality. But if John Dee sought light from the angels, the next figure plunged into the shadows of Imperial Russia, becoming one of the most chilling and mysterious figures of modern history. Rasputin, the mystic who haunted Russia. Among all the names on this list, perhaps none is as shrouded in legend as Grigory Rasputin. In the early 20th century, he rose from humble peasant origins to gain fame as a healer and prophet. Rasputin earned the trust of the Russian imperial family, especially Tsarina Alexandra, who believed he had the power to heal her son, Alexei, who suffered from hemophilia. His presence in the palace brought hope, but also scandal. The nobility and common people saw him as a dark figure, a manipulator who used charisma and supposed spiritual gifts to influence political decisions. His aura of mystery only grew after his death. Stories claim he survived poisoning, stabbing, and gunshots before finally dying, fueling the legend that he had supernatural powers. With Rasputin, the line between mystic, fraud, and political player completely blurred, showing how often the true power of magic lies more in people's beliefs than in spells themselves. The legacy of the magicians, from Merlin to Rasputin, through gods, prophets, enchantresses, and modern occultists, all of these figures share something in common. They spark our fascination with the unknown. Some embodied wisdom and balance, others danger and temptation. But all of them left their mark on history with a power that goes beyond the natural. And maybe that's why, even here in the 21st century, we still seek out their stories. Because deep down, magicians and mystics don't just speak of spells and rituals. They speak of our fears, our desires, and our endless search for answers science alone can't give us. So now I ask you, which of these names do you think is the most mysterious of all? Drop your answer in the comments. Your choice might reveal a lot about the way you see the invisible world.